Well, hello and welcome to the Church Office Podcast. My name is Gavin Smith, and it's a joy today to welcome you to our Admin and Ops podcast. We love talking about the work of ministry behind the scenes. And on our podcast, we love getting guests. And one of my favorite guests is John Truscott. Good to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks, Gavin. It's great to be here.
It's great, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about church reviews, and that's our topic today. And John's just got a huge wealth of knowledge that he's going to share with us. So an exciting topic to think about today. Before we get into it, I want to do a big shout out to our sponsors, Church Suite. Thank you again for sponsoring the podcast, for supporting the work of ministry with the church office. We really appreciate it. And if you've not come across Church Suite, they're very well known to lots of church managers and administrators. If you're a pastor who's on your own, this might be a piece of software that you might find useful for your church as well. If you don't have someone in an admin role, they've got a whole range of modules, databases. You can do groups through it, rotas through it. You can plan the Sunday morning, and there's a whole host of things. They're keeping it up to date. They're looking at new ideas and learning from them. So Gavin and the team at Church Suite, thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. John, tell us how you're doing. You've almost retired, or you are on that journey. Give us an update for our listeners on...
Yeah, it feels like a journey rather than a one-off action. What I've done is retired from client work, and I did that at the end of December.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing any more training or consultancy assignments for clients, one-to-one, churches, or whatever.
Yeah.
I am well over retirement age and decided the time had come for that. But I am keeping on my writing work. So my website will continue to expand in its resources, but it'll be a website of resources now, more than a website of resources and client work.
Yeah.
And I'm also continuing a number of projects, including the UCAN distance learning course, which I lead the tutor team for, and I'm going to stay doing that for the moment.
Brilliant.
I also want to spend some time looking at a lifetime of working in church operations and trying to index and categorize and file everything in a way that means that others can benefit from it in the future.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a busy retirement. About half my work more than half my work has been lost, but I'm adding in other ways to it.
Yeah.
So I should be doing new things, but no client work now.
That's good. And John said that he's got a revamp on the website, which will be going live in the next couple of days, which is really exciting. And if you've never been on John's website, then please go and check it out. This is a wealth, John. There must be over 200 plus materials on there that people can download on all ranges of topics.
There's over 200 items, certainly, in the resources section, and I should be adding to that more. And in fact, what we do today, Gavin, I'll write up that and add it to the resources there too.
Yeah.
Yes, the new sites go live tomorrow, but it'll take me a day or two to reword some of it and get it all sorted. So from the middle of February, it'll be up and running properly.
And I'm so grateful for John. John's made a huge difference in my life, and we've had lots of one-to-ones, John, and been on the end of some of your great mentoring. And I just, as a personal friend, it's lovely to have you on the podcast. So we chatted about what topic to cover today, and church review seemed to be kind of landing with us both. We kind of new year. Teams are sometimes going away. People are often thinking about the plan for the year ahead. But we're going to focus today, aren't we, John, about looking back with reviews. Fill us in on what you're thinking.
As we thought about this, and I'm so grateful to you, Gavin, for sort of suggesting the topic and making me think about it. I realize there's two sorts of review. One is a review of the past. So you look back and say, how did we do on that?
Yeah.
Or how did last year go? Or how did last Sunday go? Or whatever. That's looking at the past.
Yeah.
But there's also a review of the present, a sort of health check of where are we? How are we doing today?
Yeah.
And both are review. But I want to suggest that today we focus on the past, and perhaps we could do another podcast at some stage in the future.
Yeah.
On assessing the present to plan for the future. So for me, review is all about learning lessons for the future by looking back over the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's great, John. And lots of churches that I've met are not always good at this topic, are they? Putting it politely, John. It's not something that church leaders or maybe some admin and ops teams are great at doing. We seem to go from one activity to the next activity without stopping and pausing. Uh,
Yeah, and I want to try and today emphasize the need to, when we've done something, to go back and assess it,
yeah,
because that's a learning exercise for the future. This
yes,
is There's a difference between living in the past and learning from the past.
hmm
And I'm not, by doing this, wanting people to live in the past at all. Um, but I do want us to learn from it.
yeah,
And if we don't assess what happened, what was good, what wasn't so good, unless we're prepared to own up to failure in the past of some sort,
yeah,
then we're not going to learn lessons for the future.
yeah,
Some of the topics I've trained in over the years, um, and not me naturally, and things I've made a mess of in the past. And I think
hmm
I can train on them because I've made a mess. So
yeah,
working in a team, for example, I've done quite a bit of training on that. But I'm a loner. I'm not
yeah,
a team player easily, and so I've had to work at that
yeah,
to make it work when I've led teams.
yeah,
But it's looking back and being prepared to be honest with oneself and honest with God,
yeah.
and let Him teach us that we can learn so much for the future.
Yeah, that's right. There can be this always looking forward, can't there? Trajectory. Um, and yeah, we've got so many lessons that we can learn as we go back, and we do find there are lots of patterns in the past. There are things that we can do better, and I think building this kind of review culture into and that activity into our programs, into milestones and points is helpful.
Let me, Gavin, you've just said review culture. Let me just pick you up on that
All
because
right, go on then.
it's a great phrase.
Yeah,
Um, it's actually having an attitude that what we're going to do is going to be reviewed.
yeah,
I think the concept of review is so frightening for some churches because suddenly some whiz kid of a leader stands up and says, we're going to review that.
yeah,
And it looks as if it's criticism. It looks as if it's somebody getting their way. We need to generate a culture that
yeah,
we're actually going to learn from the past.
yeah,
And then we can do it without the threat
yeah,
that it's somebody trying to get, their own back on us, that someone trying to judge us. And I think that's why some churches are so anxious about doing it, because this idea of judgment, we're not to judge others,
yeah,
but we need to judge ourselves, and we need under God to be led by Him
yes,
to see what's worked and what
yeah,
hasn't.
yeah,
So that's a
yeah,
great phrase, a culture of review.
yeah,
If we can build that in a church by by practically doing it,
yes,
showing people how effective it can be, that's great.
yeah. And the starting point for that, John, isn't it? Is humility, isn't it? We live in a broken world. We're broken ourselves. We're going to make mistakes, and so we want there to be a gospel, culture where grace is at work, and yeah, we can be comfortable looking back and saying, oh, actually we didn't get that quite right, and it's okay, but what can we learn from that? And that does take some leadership, doesn't it? It does take a number of people, um rather than just you on your own, John, as well.
Well, there's all sorts of examples of review. Shall we just list some
Yeah,
of
let's do those.
what there can be? I mean, you can review things in a group or a team. So a church staff meeting on a
Hmm.
Monday, should we say, or Tuesday, can well review the previous weekend.
Yeah,
How did it go? What went well? What about the service? What didn't go well? What can
yeah,
we do next Sunday to improve on that? So
yes.
it can be a group or a team, or it can be we organised an activity, we organised a mission weekend. How did that go?
Hmm.
Um, what do we learn from it next time? Do we not need to do it again? What do we learn from it that time?
Yes.
So it can be a team or a group, but it can be an individual.
Yeah.
And I suppose if you think in line management terms, if it's a member of staff, it's saying, in a review time, sometimes known as appraisal. That word's going out, I'm pleased to say.
Yeah.
Um, the idea of reviewing your work over the past year, what's gone well in your work, what's gone well in your relationships,
Yeah.
what's gone well in your attitudes, and what
Yeah.
hasn't. Churches can do it. Many churches have what's sometimes called a mission action plan, MAP.
Mhm.
And it's no good having a plan if you don't actually go back at the end of each year and say, well, what have we achieved in
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
So many churches think that planning is all about setting up a plan and then ignoring it.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, but
Yeah.
that's what often happens.
Yeah.
And we need to go back and say, we said we were going to do this. Have we done it?
Yeah.
And okay, if you haven't, you haven't.
Yeah.
But what do we then do? Is it something we thought wasn't worth doing in the first place? Or is it something we've delayed?
Yeah.
Does it need to go back into the plan or does it come off the plan?
Yeah. And that
And
is interesting, John, isn't it? Because often some of the reviews that I've been in, you look back at the things that you can give thanks for, and those are, and that seems to be the whole part of the review. We give thanks for these things, and God's done this and this, and we've seen His work. But we don't tend to look at those negative things, those things that we actually could try and do better. And so, yeah, so there's a Thanksgiving that is kind of a huge part of the review, but not so analyzing how we could have done it better.
well, we need to review success, but we even more need to review failure.
Yeah,
When something didn't work out, was that our fault? Was it circumstances?
yeah,
Was it the fact that we got the timing wrong? What are the lessons we learn for next time we do this?
yeah,
Or do we do it? Perhaps it's not worth doing again.
yeah,
And it's those sort of lessons.
yeah,
Can I add on two other different sorts of review of the past?
yeah. Go for it.
And this gets quite personal in one sense, because I wonder if we need to have some discipleship reviews for ourselves too,
Mm.
of actually saying, how are we doing as a growing Christian?
Yeah,
Are we growing?
yeah,
Are we becoming more Christ-like?
yeah,
As a church, are we growing spiritually?
yeah.
Now that's even more challenging
That is challenging.
than
Yeah,
what we've talked about. But I
yeah,
think it's important that we do. And there's another sort still, and that's remembering. I'm just aware that in Scripture, the Psalms are packed full of advice to remember the Exodus.
mm.
Many of the Psalms go back to crossing the Red Sea, crossing the Jordan,
Yeah,
of the Passover. And Jesus himself, on the night before he died, told us to do this in remembrance of him.
yes,
So there is biblical warrant for remembering what God has done in the past.
yeah, yeah,
And that is also part of review. It doesn't just have to be the sort of the management
yeah,
bits of it.
yeah. And that's those two are interesting, John, isn't it? The discipleship review. When I saw your notes and we were talking about what we are going to cover, I would never have. I don't. I'm trying to think. Have we ever done a discipleship review in our church? I mean, we may sit and talk about how things are going on a Sunday. What's the teaching diet? How's that going? How's it landing with people? What are they, enjoying? But yeah, an individual discipleship review, or spending some time coming alongside somebody in a one-to-one and saying, where would you like to grow this year? And where have you grown in the past? And I would never have thought of that as being on the list, but it's interesting.
Well, I think we need to tackle this.
Yeah.
There's one item on my website, training notes, I've got it here actually, 81, which I've called an MOT for Disciples of Jesus.
Okay. Yeah. MOT. I like that.
Now, this is not so much it is partly reviewing the past, but it's more assessing the present, which I said we'll tackle on another occasion.
Mm.
But the two merge into each other.
Yeah.
And what this tries to do is, it was a group of men, two or three men in my church, said to me, is there any assessment of us as disciples that you can point us to? And I thought, I just don't know of one. So I
Yeah.
wrote this how would you assess your discipleship?
Yeah.
So that's more assessing the present, but it also
Mm.
looks at how have we grown in the past. So it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
And my two definitions of review, reviewing the past and reviewing the present, do merge into each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perhaps on this one.
Yeah.
But Yeah, if we want to grow as disciples, we ought to be assessing ourselves, and I'm just aware of my own failure in this
Yeah,
completely.
yeah, it's true. And I'm just thinking about it myself, John, thinking what am I like and how do I approach Sunday mornings and how sometimes I can just go through the mundane of turning up, but actually just thinking about how I engage on a Sunday and what does my engagement look like over the last year. Um, yeah, it does. Yeah, it's helpful to think through. Yeah,
Well, that's another aspect of review, and I think it's an aspect we shouldn't ignore.
yeah,
The idea that we can review our own Christian history
yeah,
individually and corporately as a church
yes,
and say, are we growing as Christian people? Are we becoming more like the Lord we serve?
yeah,
But that's quite challenging and very un-British.
yes. It is quite.
I don't know about the Welsh. You could talk about them, but from my English perspective,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
um, that's none of your business.
yeah,
Somebody could say, unless we manage to get this culture of review,
yeah,
and I come back to that point you made again.
yeah,
Um, Once it becomes part of the culture, then people accept it,
yeah,
but it's quite a challenge.
yeah. And there's safety in that, isn't it? That culture is there's safety to share where we got things wrong, and yeah, not to associate blame with it, John, where
It's
so
not
often it
judgment, it's
can.
not judging, it's not blaming, and it's saying we all fail in this.
Yeah,
Let's help one another. Let's encourage each other.
yeah,
We're not here to sort of point out failure. We're here to say, what lessons are we learning for the future? Turn it into something positive.
yeah, yeah.
Can I go on growing as a Christian?
Hmm. Yeah, it's useful. So, John, in your experience, then we got these five different reviews that we're looking back on. Um, who carries them out? I mean, what do you you
Well,
know?
there's a whole range of possibilities.
Yeah,
You can do it yourself.
yeah,
And for many years in my ministry, I've taken a week away in August to go away from home and really look back through the previous year.
hmm,
And although doing it yourself means you have blind spots,
yeah,
and it needs to be more than just this, that for me has been hugely beneficial
yeah,
because I've been so busy in ministry and I haven't had time to do this reflection.
hmm,
But going away for a week and just being out in the countryside has for me been an absolute life changer
yeah,
of
and
thinking
it,
I'd forgotten that God worked like this in this way
yeah,
a
yeah,
year ago
yeah,
because I've been too busy rushing on from there.
yeah, yeah.
It's
That's
like
helpful.
Jesus taking the disciples across the lake to get away from the crowds. He wasn't very successful in getting away from the crowds, but he wanted to take them away to be with them, to talk to
Hmm,
them, to encourage them, to teach, to train them, to mentor them.
yeah,
And he needed to get away from that.
yeah,
So it can be yourself, it can be colleagues, what's called peer review.
hmm,
So in a team, are you prepared to review together how
hmm,
something's gone?
yeah,
Um, it obviously can be a manager if you're thinking of a staff appraisal sort of context,
yeah,
um, or it can be people underneath, if that's the right term, um, and it could be customers, what the world would call customers.
hmm, hmm,
So the sort of trust pilot
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
Um, Got to be careful about using that in churches, but I sometimes think it wouldn't be a bad idea. Um,
um,
or an external, it can be somebody from outside who doesn't have the baggage. That that is again, it's what a consultant often does, goes
yeah,
in and looks with fresh eyes.
yeah,
But that can be assessing the present more than the past.
yeah,
But it can be quite helpful to think, how did something go? To have somebody in who wasn't part of it,
yeah,
who can ask the awkward questions.
yeah,
And the awkward questions usually start with the word why.
yeah, yeah,
So you did that. Why did you do that?
yeah,
Why didn't you do that?
yeah,
Have you thought about that?
yeah,
We loved asking how questions,
mm,
but it seems to me that if you want to get out some benefits for the future, you need to ask why questions.
yeah, Yeah. That's
So
useful,
it can be
John.
a whole
That
range of people, and I've written about 360-degree review where you use a bit of everybody.
yeah, 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 that's useful. And John, it just brings to mind Exodus 18, doesn't it? Jethro's, leadership advice to Moses, what you're doing is not good at all.
Gavin, you love Jethro, don't you?
I love that bit of scripture. I get excited about it because I think it's a perspective that comes from totally from outside, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's almost outside of Israel, isn't it, as well, because he's not part of it. But maybe somewhere in the text he does get saved. But yeah, he brings a perspective that Moses can't see, and that's often the case, isn't it? That I find when I draw other people into to review. Um, how am I doing in this? How am I doing at home with the
Yeah.
kids? And you talk to your wife about that. Um, you're terrified of the answer, but it's right, isn't it? People's perspectives from outside are so useful.
I often say that when I, as a consultant, go into a church, I don't go in as an expert. I go in as somebody who's looking at everything completely fresh.
Mm, yeah,
And there are some things that just jump out at you. Anybody could do this, anybody,
yeah, yeah,
because there are some things that jump out at you immediately, which are invisible to those in the melee.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and very often, all you've got to do is to be a consultant is just to say what you see,
yeah,
and they haven't seen it.
yeah, yeah.
And Gavin, you're taking over quite a bit of my consultancy work and doing things like that now, which is great. And so you're coming into this and seeing much more of it.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? And you're right, John, because sometimes you do feel like you're going in thinking, right, I I've got a day on site. How can you fully understand the church and what's going on? But you're right, you just say what you see. Um
And
and
I'm usually terrified at that point
oh yeah,
because the expectation from the church is huge. He's going
yeah,
to sort us out.
yeah,
And I'm not a prophet
yeah,
who can say, "Thus saith the Lord."
yeah,
I hope I am prophetic
yeah,
in that I can say, I think God may be saying to you, why are you doing that?
yeah,
And sometimes you're trying to help a church ask the right questions rather than giving them the answers.
yeah,
It varies.
yeah.
But anyway,
And,
what we're saying is a whole range of people
mm,
can do this review, from
mm,
yourself, managers, those under you, 360,
yeah.
customers. Um, I mean, one thing I'd love to do is ask people in a church, visitors to a church on a Sunday, how did you find it?
Mm, yeah.
Because very often those visitors will go home and say, well, that was a rotten welcome, wasn't it? You know, the unfriendly bunch they were. And the
Yeah.
church never get to hear that
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't realize
Yeah.
they're. And very often the church tells me we're really welcoming, we're really friendly. And what I discover when I go on a Sunday to that church
Mm,
is they're so friendly to each other
yeah.
that they ignore the visitor.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to be shown that and told that.
Yeah.
And then they realize it.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be more intentional to make the changes. Yeah,
Yep.
but until you do see it, you can't, isn't it? It's like having cream cheese on your face, isn't it? Eating a cream cheese bagel and you've got something on your face and you didn't even realize it's there. But when you're told about it, you can go, oh yeah, we do need to do a better job of welcoming visitors. We do need to do a better job of
Yeah.
this because our perspective is, you're right, we're a very welcoming church, but we're too familiar with it, aren't we? And
I mean, I've never had a cream bagel on my face.
no.
This illustration is beyond my understanding. No, no, I know what you see.
Yeah, it's we need each other, don't we?
Yep.
And we're going to keep coming back, John, aren't we, to this culture thing of it's good to review, it's safe to review. We're not going to blame or make judgment. We're learning, and that comes out through
Yes.
your notes, isn't it? This lifelong learning of how we can do things better for the glory of God.
Yeah. So why don't we?
Yeah. Right.
I've been mulling on that. Why don't
Yeah.
we?
Why don't we?
And I jotted down 5 things that I thought.
Hmm.
I think we're frightened of showing up failure.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got to be successful.
Hmm.
And actually, we ought to be real. We're frightened of something not being what it might be.
Yeah.
For many of us, I think we don't want to judge others. We're told, judge not that you be not judged yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
very iffy about judging others. I'm frightened when I go into a consultancy assignment because it could look as if I'm judging.
Yeah.
But if we steer away from that altogether, if we have an attitude of judging, that's one thing. If we have an attitude of trying to help you learn for the future,
Yeah.
that's a very different sort of, I don't think that's what Jesus meant
Yeah.
when he talked about blogs and
Yeah.
specs and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're frightened of challenge. Another reason why we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Life's comfortable. We don't see it as a priority. We're too busy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely the case, isn't it? Yeah.
That we set up this plan. Well, that's done that now. We put a tick in the box,
Yeah.
and off we go back to normal life now.
Yeah.
But if you have a plan of any sort, or an intention, or a desire, or a wish to do something, and don't review it afterwards,
Yeah.
why
It's
did you
in,
do it in the first
it'd
place?
be an interesting question to ask, John, wouldn't it, listeners, to say, have you sat down and reviewed your Christmas program or something? Because
Okay, well, let's take that as a great example. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, now is the time to review Christmas,
yeah,
not in December next year.
yeah, or September or something like that. Yeah, when you can't quite remember.
What was good? I mean,
Yeah,
was it that you had a carol service and you had 200 people there, but you didn't have any literature to give them
yeah, yeah,
that actually would have pointed them to something that would tell them about the Christian faith and what it was all about?
mm,
Um, what went right with the service? What was so good? What did people appreciate?
yeah,
And what was not so good?
yeah.
What was the carol nobody had ever done before and nobody sang and we didn't rehearse it and it all went decidedly wrong in the
It,
wrong key?
it totally bombed. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, should we avoid that next year or should we do some rehearsal for it next year?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But you're right, Kevin. Now is the time. Just
It
January would have
probably
been
is.
better.
Yeah, January is probably better to have done it.
Um,
But it's
to
interesting,
review
isn't it? You know, how
Christmas.
many of our listeners have gone, yeah, we've reviewed, we've reviewed Christmas and we've already got 4 or 5 things that we've learned that we're going to do different next year.
Yeah,
And yeah, you're right. That's how we need to, we're rushing from one thing to the next and we forget to do this. And the
yeah,
huge benefit that there is to this.
yeah.
Um,
And I think another reason why we don't do this is because for us, planning is all about planning for the future,
yeah.
not about seeing how we've done so far on that
Mm,
plan.
mm,
You can't have a plan without a review.
yeah. Yeah.
And you then amend the plan for the next year and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's very true. Um, and we tend to go away as leaders, John, and try and look back at what were we hoping that God would do this year in our church, and we've got 4 or 5 things that are really important to us, and often we can, yeah, we don't go straight back to those as the first exercise that we do in the new year on a retreat. We fill it with all the things that we want to talk about for the new year that's coming, and you're like, okay, actually, no, it'd be good to look back and go, actually, what has God done amongst us? And I think sometimes churches aren't great at writing down some of these things that are important to them, or some of their vision statements or things that they would love God to do. They don't
yeah.
always write this stuff down.
Well, we forget what God
Yeah.
has. And that's what I find on going away for a week once a year
Mm,
as an individual.
mm,
I look back over all my assignments during the year
mm.
and think, hey, at the moment I'm thinking I'm a complete failure. Things have gone wrong in the recent one or whatever.
Yeah.
God worked in that one. God worked in that one. I could
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah.
And that can be so encouraging.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at just the recent thing that went wrong in some way,
Yeah.
then you're feeling down.
Yeah. You're right. John, let me
And
ask you a
and we need to look
question.
back 5 years and 10 years sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Um, and there can be a temptation, can't there, to think about Christmas again. we've got to do this all completely different. We've got to do this all, new. And we miss it sometimes. And we've been chatting as a team saying, actually, what were the things that people enjoyed? The traditional carols. They enjoyed singing together. So let's have fewer presentation songs or fewer, songs that the choir might, do. Um, and yeah, then trying to come up with new styles and
Well,
new ideas
why
and
do
new backdrops.
non-church members come to a carol service? They want to sing the stuff they know
Yeah,
from childhood or whatever.
yeah,
Um, and then you can put a presentation of the good news of Jesus in among that.
yeah, yeah,
That's fine.
yeah.
But church members may want to sing modern, contemporary style music items
Mm,
for
mm,
Christmas.
mm,
But if you're aiming to attract other people,
yeah,
what they need, what they want, will be different from what church members want.
yeah, yeah,
And what's the point? Why? Here's my why question. Why have a carol service?
yeah, yeah. Go back to that basic question.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Yeah, no, that's useful. John, let me ask you a question then about we talked a little bit about appraisals there and people can feel, scared about doing something like that. I've experienced that with our staff here. There's a general underlying anxiety that as soon as you say, right, it's the new year and we're going to do some staff reviews, they just seem to go into some sort of not panic, but some sort of like, oh no, I this is the last thing that I want to be doing now. Um, have you seen some have you got some good pointers there for people? Like we've been talking about it, saying should we make this an optional thing that people ask for? Um, and I don't know where to land on it quite yet, John, because we
no,
know people
I
learn
think
from the reviews and
you
they
know,
get better at their jobs and that
yeah,
also they enjoy that as well. But there are some
I think they
challenges.
need to see the end result to say that, we're actually trying to make things better for you.
Mm,
I think they need to see it as a two-way process
yeah,
that actually they are going to review the manager, if I can use
yeah,
that terminology,
yeah,
rather than just the manager reviewing them.
yes,
So if it's a top down, it just top down,
yeah,
then it's going to be a threat.
yeah,
If it's a how can we together work this one out?
yeah,
And what do I need to learn about the way I manage you?
yeah, yeah,
What is it that irks you? And
yeah,
and we would need to not only have a culture of review, we need to have a culture of honesty,
yeah, yeah,
of freedom to actually say, you're my line manager, but I find that really tough
yeah,
because you never encourage me,
yeah,
we say, and you're always criticizing me,
yeah, yeah,
or something like that.
yeah,
And a
yeah, and it,
chance then to apologize and to say, well, let's see what we can do. I need to do better this year,
mm,
just as you need to do better next year. If it's seen as a exercise where we all seek to see how we can work better together,
yeah, yeah,
rather than a hierarchical thing
yes,
or a tick box scenario,
yeah.
then that's just one idea, Gavin.
Yeah, I think that's good. Those things are good, and we've given review details so that people got a little bit of time to go away and say, like, in 2 weeks' time we're going to do this. Would you take a review sheet? Start to look at some of those questions, and yeah, you have to do some hard work on that as well, don't you? Um, but it's an interesting thing, and I think what I found when I've been chatting to other leaders or other administrators and managers is that often some for them, John, they're being reviewed by church leader who really doesn't understand what they do or knows the length of which they do, and I don't know if you've got any thoughts to speak into that as well.
Oh, that can be so frustrating.
Mm,
Um, is the right person reviewing them?
yeah.
Um, because you may not have a hierarchical sort of line management structure as you might have in a business.
Mm,
Are we doing this in an attitude of prayer
yeah.
and not just glossing over with a spirituality,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
actually seeing this as part of including discipleship? I mean, I would include discipleship
Mm,
to some extent within a work review.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's helpful.
But there's a huge subject there in itself, Gavin, and we haven't
It
got
is,
time
isn't it? Yeah,
today.
and that is, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so if someone was to start this, John, we've gone back to it a couple of times, haven't we? The culture of review. How do you build into the culture? What can somebody like I, as a church manager, do? And what example can I set? What could I do practically to input into that culture?
I think you need to show the benefits.
Okay.
Um, this isn't just an exercise. It's certainly not a management exercise.
Mm,
I'm not asking for that,
yeah.
but I'm asking for well, the scripture examples more of assessing the present. But if you look at Revelation chapters 2 and 3, where the seven churches are assessed,
Yeah.
there you'll find that that's more of what I said we're not so much covering today, which is the
Mhm.
present assessment rather than the
Yeah.
past review. But it's the same concept. It's the same idea. There, to me, Revelation chapters 2 and 3 are the consultant's sort of template.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you remember, the angel says, "You've done this well, you've done that well, but this I have against you."
Yeah.
And those seven churches needed to hear a few things,
Yeah.
just as we do. So I think see it in a scriptural and positive context
Yeah.
of what is going to come out of it, and show that, again, yes, going back to my point, that you're learning it's a learning exercise for you too.
Yeah. 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 And as the manager of someone, managing somebody else, yeah, it's a great opportunity to start there. So rather than the focus be right, let's go straight to you. Is there anything
Yeah.
that you felt that I've not done well this year? Anything that I could have done
And
different?
don't just throw that question at them
Mm,
cold. Know that it's part of the exercise. They can say that, and you want to know things that you need to learn.
yeah.
But that's just review of staff, which is only
Yeah.
one
One
narrow
aspect.
part of this whole concept of review.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, it gives the advantages. It stops you making mistakes. Review stops you making the same mistakes again and again.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm what's called a lay reader, local licensed minister in my own church, an Anglican church.
Mhm.
So I preach. And I want to know how a sermon has gone.
Mm,
I need to know that wasn't a good illustration to use at that point.
yeah.
I need to know that people couldn't understand what you were saying at that point. Because then my next sermon can remember that.
Yeah.
I remember once somebody said to me after a sermon, "You used the word Gentile, but didn't explain it. Some people here hadn't got a clue what a Gentile is."
Okay.
And I just assumed they would
Yeah.
understand that. So from there on, my next time I used it, I explained the word and then grinned at the person sitting in the chairs.
Thank you for that bit of feedback. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's just so helpful. Stops me making the same mistakes again.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
allows me to develop and grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so true. And that is so helpful, isn't it? Yeah. We don't want to be continuing making the same mistakes again and again, do we? And
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Unless we do have that review, then that is our tendency, just to default to what we've always done. Um, there must be some dangers to that, though, John, as well. In terms of,
It can come across as a managerial approach.
yeah,
That is the danger.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and it can be pastorally damaging to somebody who's fragile if we're not careful.
yeah,
If we're too, this is you make the teas and coffees on a Sunday. We're
yeah,
going to give you a review.
yeah,
There's far too much sugar in, or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Too
Somebody
much
who's
milk or
pastorally
whatever. Yeah,
fragile, we need to be terribly careful. We're
yeah,
not there to judge. We're there to help
yeah,
and encourage and build up and grow. And some people need more encouragement, and some people need more honesty.
yeah, yeah,
And it's
yeah,
knowing which is which.
yeah,
But saying thank you is a great way to start
yeah,
in review.
yeah,
Um, and I'm just conscious that somebody once, when I was doing something on a team thing and saying we need to say thank you to people in a training session, and somebody said, "We don't need to say thank you because it's part of Christian service."
Mm,
And
mm.
I was thinking, now, how on earth do I answer that one? But fortunately, the whole group turned on him immediately.
That's useful. Let
So
somebody else address it.
my pause of 5 seconds was well worth it,
Yeah,
while I thought.
yeah,
Uh, and said, of course, we need to be thanked.
yeah,
I mean, I'm a volunteer blood donor,
yeah.
and I gave blood last week, in fact. And the blood donor people are brilliant. They send me a certificate every time I've done 25.
Yeah.
They send me an email thanking me the day after I've donated.
Okay.
And then a week later, they send me another email telling me where my blood has gone to, which hospital it's gone to, and how it'll be used.
Yeah.
Um, they're on the day, the nurses are saying, "Thank you so much for coming."
Yeah.
There's a real feel that they're there to
Yeah.
encourage you because they know that if they do that, they'll get you back again,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
need your blood.
Yeah.
And I just learned so much from the secular setting
Mm,
of the blood donor scheme
yes.
about how they go about treating me, and think, why do we in churches very often not say thank you to people for what they're doing
Yeah.
regularly,
Yeah.
not give them information that would encourage them to do more of what they're doing,
Yeah.
but just assume that because they're Christians, they can just get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And often people aren't aren't able to assess the fruit themselves, are they? So you can be serving in a team for many years, and you might be on the hospitality team doing, teas and coffees, but be totally unaware of, we, as someone who's a church leader, may know a story about how somebody reflects on the first time they come to church, and they met this person and they had a cup of tea and they had a great welcome. That made a difference to that person staying and becoming a member.
Exactly.
And they don't hear that, do they? That success
So
story and that,
the leader needs to go to the coffee people and
mm,
say, just to let you know, just to encourage you, last Sunday we had
yeah,
a newcomer here and they stayed around because of the coffee you were serving.
yeah,
And I was able to have a real chat with them and help them through something that was difficult in their life.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
And that then tells the coffee person, hey, I'm not just doing coffee, I'm part of ministry.
yeah,
I'm part
yeah,
of the ministry of this church.
yeah. And I got into a habit, John, where I'll often, one of the first things I'll try and do on a Monday is just to, we have a team meeting and we'll say, was there anyone on Sunday that just went over and above to help? And that might be someone who's on a team, but it wasn't their week to serve, and somebody's fallen ill and they've jumped in, and nobody, everyone's totally oblivious to it apart from maybe the team leader or me. And being able to go back and just write to them and say, thank you, thanks for doing that, and thanks for serving us. And this makes a difference to the whole church, being able to enjoy, whatever that might be that they're serving in. And we need to kind of build in some, I don't know, some sort of, when you're talking about blood service there, John, you're saying there's an email that goes and then there's a follow-up, and those are probably automated to some extent, but
Yes, but you feel good when you get them.
yeah, you do. So whether it's a
Um,
card or a little note or a text or
well,
something.
I've got, you can't see it here, but on top of my bookshelf up there, there's my certificate for doing 75 donations.
Okay.
And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, I'm not saying we should give a certification every time we do
yeah.
75 coffees or something like that, but are there ways in which we can actually say,
Yeah,
review things in this very positive light
yeah,
of saying, we want to say thank you. We want to say,
yeah,
we want to review this and say, what you're doing is great.
yeah,
And here's a practical way of doing it.
yeah. And I think for me, John, most weeks I'm doing the notices at church, and last Sunday we did a eating after the meeting where we fed sort of 500 people in the church, on these kind of crazy banquets, and we do it once a month as a way just to enjoy fellowship together as a church. And it's on my list Sunday to go, thank you for those who served in the catering team. And we want to, sometimes we can shy away from this, can't we? This what the Bible calls us to do, to give honor to people and to point people out and say, thank you for for doing this. And we, there's ways that we can build that into our culture. And I want
Yeah.
our notices not just to be right, we want you to sign up here, sign up there, do this, do that. hang on, we want to say thank you for doing this.
And that's now we're bringing in this whole theme we're talking about of thanks. It's
Yeah.
part of the positive aspects of
Yes.
review.
Yeah.
And when you do a staff review, I want to say thank you for the work you've done this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Um, and it seems to me that this, why are we so worried about review? Why do people find it negative or challenging or threatening?
Yeah.
It's because we're not doing enough of the, and it mustn't just be, I've got a tick list here of things that I've got to do. I've got to say, oh, I've got to say thank you to you first. Thank you for the work you've done this year.
Yeah.
Tick.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
mustn't be that.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
must be a genuine, not just once a year, but ongoing.
Yeah.
You lead a team, you're reviewing how something went. Encourage people, thank them for their contribution to it. Yes, we learned a few things went wrong and we're going to put those right.
Yeah.
But let's be positive. So this has been a podcast talking about reviewing the past.
Yeah.
And now we've gone on to a theme of Thanksgiving, which is great.
Which is great. Which
Great.
it flows out of
Um,
why we do a review, John, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, can I
Yeah.
give some quick, as we close, some quick examples of
Yes,
some reviews
please.
that people may not have thought about? I just jotted down
Yeah.
some here on my
Yeah.
notes. Um, exit interviews. Now, you have those for
Mm,
staff very often,
mm.
but why not do an exit interview of people who leave your church and move to somewhere else?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
Um, even if they're moving house and moving away from the district,
Yeah.
but even if they're moving to the Baptist church down the road,
Yeah.
your hated rival, I hope not. Um,
You're
do
right.
we
Yeah.
actually say somebody would love to talk to you just for half an hour to find out what you've learned about membership here,
Mm,
what we need to learn from what you've experienced,
yeah.
and what 3 changes you would like to see us making in the life of this church
Yeah.
to make it a better body of Christ
Yeah.
in some way. So exit
That's a
interviews,
really good idea, John.
not
That's
just
a
of
really good.
staff, but of actually
Yeah.
church members. I've written that
Yeah.
up in Training Notes 95. A review of a committee meetings. If you're on a committee or a council, a PCC in an Anglican church,
Hmm.
do you actually review how you've done after
Yeah.
a year?
Yeah.
What's been good about our meetings?
Yeah.
The fact they all overran by 3 hours to 2 o'clock in the morning, is that a good idea or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what have we all been allowed to contribute? Has there been enough variety? Have
Mm,
we actually achieved anything in that year? What have we decided that has changed the life of this church?
mm,
A review of a body does business meetings, it seems to me, is
yeah.
almost unheard of, but it's
Yeah.
just as valuable as reviewing
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah. Absolutely right.
Um, you can review a particular ministry, your
Mm,
pastoral ministry to older people or something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you can review a team of preachers.
Yeah.
If
That's
you're a
helpful.
team of people who do the preaching, you may find it difficult to take criticism from somebody in the congregation who doesn't know anything about preaching or the Bible. But
Yeah.
how about taking it from each other and doing it as a team
Mm,
effort?
yeah.
What 3 things would you love to see about this person's preaching that need to change?
Yeah.
What 3 things would you, or one thing perhaps,
Yeah.
would you do you really appreciate and want to give thanks for?
Yeah. Yeah. That's helpful. Yeah.
Um, asking visitors on a Sunday, can we actually do some sort of trust
Mm,
pilot
mm,
thing in a very sensitive way?
yeah.
Um, we just want to improve our welcome on a Sunday. You were with us last Sunday.
Yeah.
What one thing would you like us to have changed
Yeah.
that could actually make a big impact in the way you felt welcome?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's helpful.
and it could be something basic. No one showed me where to sit, and I felt absolutely lost as I came through the door,
Yeah.
or whatever. It could be simple as
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And then recommending discipleship reviews, either for ourselves or in a small intimate group. It needs to be done with people who know each other intimately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would a married couple be prepared to do it on each other?
Yeah.
Let's ask that sort of question.
Yeah.
So review can be all sorts of things. A review of the past. We
Yeah.
haven't today tackled a review of the present,
Mm,
which is a health check idea, which we might look at a future podcast.
yeah. Sounds great.
But the idea of review, I just want to champion it.
Mm,
Say, if it's seen as positive learning exercise,
yes.
then we can bring glory to God by learning from our mistakes, learning what to do better,
Yeah.
and assessing the ministries that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's good. I like the one that you did on ministry on reviews, because one of the things that I noticed, John, with lots of churches is they never stop a ministry, and they never think about capacity, or they never think about, is there a season actually when, we're just going to do mothers and toddlers for the rest of our, existence as a church. But actually, sometimes it can be hard kind of to stop a ministry, and unless you are regularly reviewing it and saying, what's the number of people that are involved? What are some of the fruit that we're seeing? What are some of the challenges we are? Have we got the right leader leading this or not? We can be scared to do those. And I think, yeah,
I was in a meeting recently where somebody was actually from outside, was looking at ministries that were happening in a church, and everything that was coming up was activity. We
mm,
run this, we run that, we run that, and that sounds great, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And I felt like saying, but do we need to run all these things?
mm,
And are we actually using busyness as a cover for lack of spirituality?
yeah, yeah,
And stopping things, to me, is spiritually success when we need to, and we shouldn't be running them. But
yeah,
what many churches do is they assess themselves on how much activity they've got
yeah, yeah,
and not on their spiritual growth.
yeah. And the stats, can't they? You can, yeah, the number of people that came through the door and those things. Yeah, you're right. It's we want to work hard at looking at the fruit, and like you say, that when you stop and look at the fruit, um, it leads you to a place of thanksgiving, and it
Yeah.
leads you to a place of learning to say, how can we do this better?
Now, Gavin, I've got a question for us.
Go on.
Who's going to review this podcast?
That's true. Yeah, somebody write a review for us. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, seriously,
yeah,
I'd love to know what's been unhelpful.
yeah.
So, can we give permission to people listening
Please do.
and
Yeah,
watching
yeah. Please do.
to write
And
with one thing that we could have done better and one
yeah,
thing that encouraged them?
and that'd be great. And I'd be more than happy, and would love to hear from any of our listeners of, things that we could be doing differently and better. And particularly on this one, John, we'll send it out there. So send it to info@thechurchoffice.co.uk. Send us an email and drop it on. Or if you want to do a review through your podcast platform, and feedback through there, then we'll also get access to seeing some of that. So you're right, John. Yes. I'll look forward to hearing what people have
I
got
think
to
we
say.
have to. I don't think we have
Yeah,
any option, but we have to.
yeah. No, I think that's really helpful. Um, John, this is great, and people can go away and sort of digest this a little bit, and the questions about thinking about the kind of culture that we've got, thinking about the way that we approach reviews, and what are some of the reviews that we have currently, what are some of the reviews that we'd like to introduce into the church, or introduce to ourselves, or other staff members. And I loved your point about reviewing volunteer roles as well, and giving people an opportunity to say, right, you've served in the kids ministry for a year, tell us all the things that we need to do differently, tell us the things that we're totally unaware of, because I'm not up there every week, and I'm inspired to do some of those things, John. So thank you for your time, and for spending a little bit of time, yeah, putting these notes together for us. And we'll, as John types them up, we'll add a link to the website for people to be able to kind of download them. And John's referenced lots of different training notes throughout the podcast, and I'll add them into the show notes so people can go and directly look at them. John, is there anything else on your website that you think might be useful related to this topic?
Um, there's a topics index in the resources section of the
Okay.
website. So just look at review.
Yeah,
It's in alphabetical order, all sorts of topics. Look at review. There's a number of review churches, review individuals, review this, review that. And that'll link you up to resources that tackle this in one way or another.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. And John and I have also done a podcast that probably, it might be over a year and a half ago, John, where we looked at your church review pack. And again, this is stuff that you can check out on John's website, and do that. But if you do have any questions for us, please get in contact. Questions at thechurchoffice.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you, And if there's any particular follow-up that John or I can do, then we'd love to be able to serve you and your church more. If you're interested in finding out more about a back office review that the church office do, then please get in contact. That might be something that you might consider. And John, these are church leaders get nervous about these sometimes, but you've seen lots of fruit. You've done probably hundreds of these reviews where you've gone in behind the scenes and had a look at a church. Have you seen fruit over those last 100 reviews, John? I'd say
yes.
years, but
Not in all of them, not in all of them, but in many of them. And again, that's just the outsider, the external person, seeing things that are obvious to them, which aren't those inside.
Yeah, and it does take some humility, doesn't it, to invite someone from outside and say, come and have a look under the bonnet. Come and see what we're really like, and help us to be better. And I think if we can, get our hearts in a good place to say, actually, we want there to be humility. We want there to be this desire to grow and to learn. And I think a back office review might be something you might want to consider. So again, please get in contact with us on that. John, thank you so much for your time. It's great to have you on the podcast, and we'll certainly point everyone to your notes. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again on the podcast. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.